It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Friday edition of the show. Thanks so much for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a part of your workday. And of course, as always, big shout out to everybody listening out there on the RealAg Radio podcast. Got a great lineup for you here today. It's the RealAg Issues Panel. Kelvin Heppner, Lyndsey Smith of RealAgriculture will, of course, be here as always. And today we're joined by Mary Robinson. She is a farmer from Prince Edward Island, also former president of the Canadian Federation of Agriculture, great friend of the show, and looking forward to getting her insights from the Maritimes. She's been on the road a lot, so Mary's going to be able to provide probably some cool stories for us and perspectives here to you, the audience. We'll also be joined by Anne Wasko for a beef market update. We'll break down the cattle markets, find out about feed yard margins, how the feeder run's going, and all those kinds of things. If you have any feedback on today's show, you can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. Of course, you can also find us across all different social media platforms or call the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. Let's get to it. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll get to the beef market update right after this. It's now time for a product spotlight with the Canadian Canola Growers Association. We're joined right now by Dave Gallant. Dave, for anyone who is unfamiliar with the cash advance from CCGA, give us a bit of a brief overview on the program and how it really works to help farmers.
It gives them access to cash flow for their inventory before they have to sell that inventory. There's no fee, and farmers have access to $350,000 interest-free and another $650,000 at prime minus 0.75% on over 55 different products. So it really assists farmers with their working capital needs, especially now in the fall. And lastly, farmers only have to pay a cash advance as they sell the product, so there's no monthly or quarterly payments required, which means they only pay when they have cash flow from a sale. Farmers can apply right now. If they're not an existing customer, they simply call us at 1-866-745-2256.
Looking for robust, reliable grain storage solutions? AGI leads the industry in quality, innovation, and offerings to protect your investment. Designed for exceptional cleanout, superior strength, and unbeatable versatility, you can rest easy knowing your grain is secure in an AGI West Steel bin. With 100 years of manufacturing experience, AGI West Steel bins will exceed your expectations for reliable storage. AGI West Steel. Long-term safe storage. Find AGI at your local dealer.
Let's talk beef markets for the beef market update. We're joined by Anne Wasko with the Gateway Livestock Exchange. And great to chat with you again.
Yeah, good day, Shaun.
It feels like it's been a while, because I think the last two beef market updates, Lyndsey's done them because I've been away. So it's great to get reunited with you.
Yeah, ditto.
Oh, you don't mean that. Okay, let's get an update on the cash prices.
Well, it's been a pretty quiet week on both sides of the border for fat cattle. In the U.S., pretty steady. I guess that's good. If you're in September and you can say steady money, I think that's a good thing historically. So in the South, Texas, Kansas, 183. In the North, we're going to call it steady to one lower. They were mostly 184 live and 290 to 292 delivered dress. So come out pretty much unscathed, no big move up, obviously, but none down. We came into this week, though, Shaun, for anybody that was watching live cattle or feeder cattle futures, pretty overbought on all fronts. The previous week, we'd seen contract highs kind of made on all the months. So the market technically was due for a setback, and it took it this week, especially on Tuesday and Wednesday. We did see some recovery on Thursday, but markets this morning have opened up down again. So a little bit of volatility. Still got some of that outside news, I think, hanging over the markets in terms of, in one example would be the pending U.S. government shutdown. So markets are still, I think, overall a little bit jittery depending on what occurs there. So still some volatility there, but cash market steady. Coming north of the border into Alberta, we were very steady here as well. Quiet trade, kind of a short week here in Canada with the federal holiday in most areas today. But at the end of the night last night, 390 delivered dressed was where most of the trade happened in Alberta. That leaves your live average equivalent, according to Canfax, right around that 233. And when I go back and look, Shaun, that means we've had basically 2 months of an Alberta fed cattle market where we've been between 231 and 235, and an amazingly flat market for the summertime. So we're kind of done for trade up here for the week because of the holiday. So that's how it's going to close.
Yeah, kind of interesting that those live cattle future has had kind of a bit of a rough week, considering the fact that it's not like corn shot up and there was some sort of inverse reaction there. Corn has had its own struggles. So is this really, you mentioned the potential government shutdown, that could be a bit of a black cloud or a bit of a hangover. Maybe, some of those federal employees, maybe not sure if they'll be buying beef in the next couple of weeks. If there is a shutdown, they're not getting a paycheck, I guess. But is it demand related or what?
No, I'm going to give the tick box to technicals. I really strongly feel that, we'd had markets can't go straight up forever. I know we want that to happen, but they've been so strong. We'd had some great moves prior to this week in terms of both live and feeder cattle. They were due for a setback, and I truly think that's kind of the bulk of the reason for what we saw this week. So call it a healthy setback, if you will, because now it gives us an excuse to move higher again.
Yeah, lots of concern about, obviously, it feels like just chapter 55 of this story, but drought bias in Western Canada, especially in parts of Saskatchewan and Alberta. Grass conditions not the best for a lot of those two provinces. We need a lot of rain here this fall to put us in good shape headed into next spring. Price is good from a feeder run standpoint, the fall run. What are feeder margins like, though, for those feedlots? Are they continuing to be in the green?
Absolutely. So green, black, whatever color you want to call it. We've certainly had, again, on a spot basis, so I'm not talking about hedged or contracted cattle, but on a spot basis, depending on what category of cattle you're looking at, probably 6 to 7 months now in Western Canada of positive feeding margins. And I think that's been, a strong conduit for the very strong feeder market that has therefore resulted. So it's been one of the better stretches that we've seen in several years. And, certainly expecting that to carry on through Q4 here in 2023. I think the one thing, though, Shaun, that we're certainly watching for, even though feed grain prices are lower than a year ago, here in Western Canada, we're still higher than the U.S. when we talk about a feeding advantage or disadvantage. We're certainly in a disadvantage. And what that simply means is the cost to put on a pound of gain is costing more, and that spread is widening when you compare, say, Alberta to Nebraska. So that's always a concern. That's not how the industry was built here in Western Canada. So to have a feed grain or a feed cost disadvantage for, especially at the kind of levels we're looking at today, is kind of something we're keeping an eye on for sure.
Yeah, I will admit, I have been a little bit out of touch with where that feed barley price is. I do wonder, earlier this week, we were talking to Tyler Schau from agmarket.net, and we didn't talk about barley, but we talked about just cereals in general, specifically spring wheat. And one of the trends that we've been seeing in the Northern Plains and in Western Canada is yields are a little bit better maybe than some people first thought. And your expectations could still be low, so they're a little bit better than the low expectations that you thought you were going to get. I wonder if that kind of puts some pressure on that feed barley price going forward. I think that's something to kind of keep our eye out for, especially if we're in a cost disadvantage comparison to that U.S. corn.
Yeah, no, good point. And I was at a producer meeting earlier this week as well, and I heard the same kind of sentiment, especially out of producers in Alberta. So, yeah, that'll be something we'll keep. Like you say, we're at the end of September here. That'll be something we can narrow that gap as we go into the fall run for sure.
Yeah, and then there's going to be farmers listening to this. What are you doing arguing for lower barley prices? I'm not arguing for it. I'm saying, look, yeah. And this is kind of why I haven't looked at the corn import numbers for a while, but, even, when we had the shortage in 21, there was a lot of pressure on CP Rail to be able to deliver the amount of U.S. corn into Feedlot Alley in southern Alberta that was required. And I know talking to some yards, they've kind of stayed on that program because you don't go back and forth. It's like a week on corn, week on barley. Like you tend to stay in the dedicated feed program. It seems that at least feed yards I've been talking to.
Yeah, exactly. Certainly for a period of time. And so some of those commitments have certainly been made for the winter of 23-24.
Interesting. Any insight on some of the prices for September on an average standpoint, like for calves and cows and stuff like that?
Yeah, I did want to just touch on a couple of things now that we finished up the month of September. Certainly, we know feeder and calf markets have been on a solid trend higher all year long. It hasn't been seasonal at all. So according to CanFax, closing out September, their 5.5 pound Alberta spot calf price, so this is not the forward price, the spot price, it cracked for the last 2 weeks here in September, that $4.100 mark. So that was an exciting point to hit. On their 850 average for September here in Alberta, they were $3.28, and that was $10 higher than the August average. So again, watching that feeder cattle price specifically, September often is the annual high for the year. So it'll be interesting to watch and see what those heavier feeder cattle do as we trend into October. Not everything goes straight up, though. Just looking at hate to close on this point, Shaun, but on the slaughter cow market, the September price, again, this is an average slaughter cow price in Alberta, was $12 lower than August at $137. And this past week, we closed an average this week at $131. So again, that's a pretty typical move for cow prices as we start to head into the fall run and more cows coming to town. This year-to-date cow kill's up 8%, and this last week it was up 19%. So there's where the pressure is coming from.
Okay, I'm not going to let you end there. I'm going to ask another question. The fall run, because of the drought that we've seen in the back half here of the 23 grazing season, and we saw big numbers early in the feeder run. Are we going to run out as compared to normal, or are we expecting those volumes to kind of continue through the normal period of the fall run season?
Well, I've learned over my tenure as a market analyst, we don't ever run out, but we certainly can change that pattern of when the heaviest numbers come or don't come. In 21, the drought of 21. And so this year we've seen very similar, very heavy placement pattern into the feedlots, and that comes from that cattle on feed placement data. June, July, and August have all been up. We reported that with Lyndsey a couple of weeks ago. But what happened in 21 then is September was just a little bit lower than a historical number. We still have a calf run that happens in either by October or November. So I still expect some big numbers to move in October if it's like 21, or last year the big run happened in November. So the numbers are still ahead of us, but we do flatten out the peaks and valleys when you start moving them like we did this year in June.
Yeah, and I would imagine we're still bringing a lot out of areas like Montana as well.
Yeah, the last data that we've got from StatsCan was June, and June was a big month for feeder cattle imports. So we're awaiting the July numbers to see if that pattern continues. But yeah, certainly June for imports. And
thank you so much for being here with us today. It's great to chat with you again, and I look forward to our next one. Okay, thanks, Shaun. Have a good weekend. When we come back on RealAg Radio, we got the RealAg Issues Panel standing by. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147.
What's next for your fields? At Pioneer, delivering industry-leading genetics drives everything we do. From the scientists in the lab to our local teams with boots on the ground, we are determined to get there first. Developing top-performing products, proven in more growing conditions than ever before. Pioneer. What's next happens here. Visit pioneer.com/Canada to learn more.
You know, there's a reason we call it the Corn School. Videos on everything from planter setup, weed control, field trial results, yield strategies, and so much more. The Corn School on RealAgriculture.com has the information and advice you need to help you succeed. Brought to you by Pride Seeds and BASF, Corn School episodes are available at cornschool.com, from realagriculture.com, or as a podcast from your favorite streaming service. Download the latest podcast today.
Introducing the all-new Xerion 12 Series tractor by Kloss. Redesigned from the ground up to redefine the high-capacity four-wheel drive market. With 653 max horsepower, industry-leading hydraulic flow, a silky smooth CVT, a powerful TerraTrack undercarriage, and a quiet, comfortable cab with 20% more legroom. More than just power. The all-new Xerion by Kloss.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio. Let's get to the RealAg Issues Panel. But before we bring our panelists in, imitator stabilizer products claim dual protection, but do they actually deliver? I think not. Defend your UAN from nitrogen loss with Tribune Nitrogen Stabilizer from Koch Agronomic Services, offering superior above and below ground protection. See how others stack up at defendyourn.ca. Okay, let's bring in the panel up first. It's Kelvin Heppner coming out of Altona, Manitoba. And Kelvin, are you ready for the election next week?
Well, whether I'm ready or not, it's coming up here. Yeah, a Manitoba provincial election on October 3rd. So we will, we'll head to the polls, and it's looking like we'll have a change in government. But I think we can talk about that a bit later in the show.
Okay, we'll save it. We'll save it. I want to get your thoughts on possible Premier Wab Canoe and what that could mean for the province. Also joining us is Lyndsey Smith, coming out of the nation's capital, Ottawa, Ontario, right there in Kinburn. How's it going, Lyndsey?
Well, it's going quite well, thank you. And it has not been a boring week here in Ottawa. Let's put it that way.
No.
It's been busy, maybe too busy.
I think it'd be really interesting to be a fly on the wall in the PMO's office. Like, you sit down for your daily briefing. It's like, okay, where do you want to start?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes.
One of those.
How bad is it today?
One of those.
How bad is it?
Yeah. Give me the bad news.
Yeah.
Then give me the good news. There is no good news.
Do you see the Prime Minister during times of stress being quiet and calm, or do you see him being somebody that throws stuff?
Great question. I think that a lot of people would probably like to think he's someone that throws stuff, but I actually don't see that. I think he would be like a quiet, calm. I could see a lot of like tenting of fingers and doing that kind of thing. I could see
rolling up the sleeve.
Yeah.
Let's get down to work.
I could be very wrong. If anyone knows the PM, let me know.
Well, and our other panelist here today, maybe she can shed some light on it. Maybe she's even been in the office sitting on the couch. It is Mary Robinson, farmer from P.E.I. And as Mary, it is great to have you here.
Thanks for inviting me. And no, I've never been on the couch.
Okay. Would you suspect that he is a quiet, angry person, or someone that's throwing vases?
I'd go more passive aggressive, I think, than violently angry. That's where I put my money.
Okay. It sounds like a poll question on realagriculture.com that we should put up at some point.
I'm taking notes.
Mary, you've been busy. Like, for somebody that you were president of the Canadian Federation of Agriculture, but post that, I think you're busier than you were when you were doing the job of president. Like, what is going on? You've been all over the world.
I'm not that busy, Shaun. Honestly, at CNA or at CFA, we were way busier. I think it's just the geography that probably dazzles you, not so much the schedule. So yeah, what I have been doing, stepped away from CFA, retired, saw you at the last AGM for CFA in Ottawa in March. In May, I was elected to, I sit on the WFO board, the World Farmers Organization board. I'm the North American rep, and at the General Assembly in May, which I wasn't there in person, but I was elected as the vice president. So that role is kind of a neat role. So it just means a little bit more work at the UN, greater visibility. and, kind of getting a better sense of events like COP, which is coming up this December. And there are going to be some faces from Canada there. So just kind of really learning it still, because we didn't really have any in-persons until, it's been not even quite a year, really. So we're just kind of, I'm starting to feel more comfortable in the role and really excited about where it could go.
Now, tell us about is it the NAEU meeting that happened in
I can't
P.E.I?
believe we're there. Yes, the North American European Union Ag Leaders Conference. And we had the last one we had in person was in 2019. And Scott Ross, that you all know, Executive Director of CFA, and Keith Curry, now President of CFA. And at that point, first vice, and me president, we went to Copenhagen, and that was our first big real trip away from home as the team. And we invited the world, or the NAEU anyhow, to come to Prince Edward Island in 2021. COVID came along and kicked that schedule to the curb, so we brought everybody here in 2023. We had about 280 delegates. We were supposed to have 250, but Lori Carson, she oversold the event and people wanted to come, so they had to let a few more in. And it was a fantastic event. It was the week of September 12th, 14th, around those dates. There were a range of topics discussed. And an event like this is so neat because it brings together staff as well as producers. And there's a lot of, we had 5 formal sessions, but then there's a whole lot of formal and informal bilateral meetings. So you get a chance to have a discussion with another group. Like CFA met with CNA from Mexico, and we had some discussion about how we can maybe help them with some of the challenges they're facing in the near future. And it's a wonderful event to learn from what other people are experiencing, the opportunities, the challenges, the failures, the successes. And it was a great event. Amazing. And it was in the best place in the world, you all know.
Right there on the island. You sort of slid that in there, right? Yeah. Right. Oh, it was in Banff. Okay, that's great, Mary. Kelvin, the stakeholders getting together at a meeting like that, Canada, US, Mexico, Europe, no shortage of issues to talk about maybe in some of the real bilateral sessions, but also the hallways. You think about the U.S. and Mexico on corn. You think about Canada and U.S. on dairy, and then you bring the Europeans in. Man, there would be nonstop topics.
Yeah, exactly. And Mary mentioned the producers and staff there. I believe there are also some political leaders, some MPs from Canada and maybe from the other countries as well. So I think there will have been some valuable discussions there. And it's all about relationships and face-to-face interactions. And that's where a lot of problem solving and resolution happens. And so, yeah, you wonder what actually, it's difficult to probably measure, but you wonder what kind of progress is made on things like the right now Canada and EU. Of course, we have trade irritants in the Canada-EU trade deal that Canadian agriculture would like to see dealt with. I'm sure that was discussed in some of those meetings. You mentioned some of the other issues here in North America. And so, yeah, you wonder, will have also been some official government discussions that will have taken place. Okay, maybe not official, but on the sidelines that could be meaningful with official people.
Yeah. Speaking of policy back here at home in Canada, Lyndsey, we actually, I should tell everybody, RealAg Politics. We relaunched the series here this week, so check it out at RealAgriculture.com as well on our YouTube channel. Encourage you to do that. We had great guests to talk about a number of different ag policy things that are happening in Canada right now. And one of those big topics was with 2 of our guests, Deb Conlon from the GFO, Grain Farmers of Ontario, and Dave Carey from the CCGA, both talking about Bill C-234. This is the exemption on the carbon tax, Lyndsey. This is a big one that everybody wants, not to steal a phrase from Mr. Polyev, but they want him to bring it home.
Can we not use that phrase? Anyway, we can talk about that another time. I really don't. Okay, let's talk about Bill C-234.
It's better than Deion Sanders saying we're coming. What is that? So, anyway, go ahead.
Next. Okay, so let's focus on what's here at hand, and then we can talk about politicking after that. But yeah, so Bill C-234, of course, this is the bill that would exempt fuel used for barn heating and grain drying from the carbon tax on farm, of course. And Deb Conlon does talk about it, and we've talked about it a few times, how it does not exempt commercial grain drying from paying the carbon tax. But this bill has made it quite a ways, but you're right, it's not past the finish line, and there was some concern in the spring, certainly. There was a lot of push to try and get this bill as far as possible. We've got, I know that it was a hot topic for the senators did quite the tour this summer, and so it was a hot topic for a lot of agriculture industry to talk to the senators to make sure that it gets through. I think Dave Carey noted that it could pass third, or it could be up for third reading by the earliest, I think, is next week, if anybody wants to correct me on that. So we could see this move forward. Whether or not we will really is up to, all of the work that has been going on to try and convince everybody that, look, this is potentially, I think, Kelvin, the story that you did on this, the report says $1 billion out of the agriculture industry by 2030. That's what this carbon tax would take out. And especially in a scenario where we don't necessarily have alternatives or very good alternatives for barn heating or for grain drying and to fuel those, I'm not sure what taking $1 billion out of the agriculture industry really accomplishes. So that's sort of the message that's being put forward to hopefully get this bill through. Now,
Kelvin, we saw when the Minister of Agriculture was Marie-Claude Bebeau, she voted against this. I can't remember what Macaulay's vote was.
Against as well.
He was against as well. Okay, so
he definitely wasn't in favor. I don't know for sure if he wasn't. He may have not been in the House, but
I was actually going to say I think that
it was only Cody. There were only two or three that voted. Yeah. There were only 2 or 3 Liberal MPs that voted in favor of it, and one of them was Cody Blois.
Is that the same now then, do you think, now that he's back in the Ag Minister seat?
I think the Liberals still are opposed to this, but at this point, they can't stop it from happening if the senators let it go through. And the Senate Ag and Forestry Committee has been hearing from witnesses last week and this week, and I think the meetings might continue next week. I'm not sure where they're at, but they have been hearing from witnesses, and they've been asking lots of questions. And one big thing that farm groups have advocating for this have had to reassure senators on is that there's an 8-year sunset clause for this. Yeah. So there is the timeline for developing technology that's going to replace propane or natural gas for grain drying on the scale that it's needed in Canada. It's going to take at least 8 years. Like we're nowhere close to having something right now that could do it at the scale that's needed across the country. And so an 8-year timeline, I think, is something that some of these liberal-leaning senators that are maybe skeptical of removing the price on pollution, I think they can swallow an 8-year sunset clause, and so that I do think this will go ahead. It's just a matter of whether it's in 2 weeks or whether it's more November timeframe. That's to be determined.
That's what kind of gives me a bit of an upset stomach about the Liberal position on this. Is there is a sunset clause? Like where is the sense of what's reasonable? That's like how, like, okay, there's like, we know that you believe in the price on carbon, but there's this situation here where there is no other options. Let's give people the opportunity to, like, some runway to find other options. And there's an unwillingness to do it. And that to me is what I think a lot of farmers in Canada have a hard time getting their head wrapped around, what exactly Liberals are doing as a position on this file. And the other point, I was reminded this week why there's a sunset clause. That brought the NDP and the Greens into supporting this bill from a bipartisan standpoint. Okay.
And that sunset clause, they can renew it. Like, it can be extended.
Yeah.
It's just at that point, it needs to be reconsidered.
Okay, we got to take a break. We're rocking the RealAg Issues panel here. We got Mary Robinson, Kelvin Heppner, Lyndsey Smith, and myself. We'll be right back right after this.
Dedication. Watching the sunset over your crop is one of life's simple pleasures. The anticipation of it all. We know that feeling. Introducing our new Airflex NXT, our best honeybee header yet with the closest cut ever. Light, fast reacting, and infinitely adjustable. More yield, less time and work. Airflex NXT focuses on the future. What drives your next? Visit honeybee.ca or contact your nearest honeybee dealer.
The Advancing Women Conference, the National Leadership Conference for Women in Ag, is celebrating 10 years of bringing women in ag together. Whether you're a producer, student, entrepreneur, representative of grower association, or corporate agribusiness, invest in yourself in Niagara Falls on November 19th, 20th, and 21st. Visit advancingwomenconference.ca for more information and to register.
Welcome back to the RealAg Radio and the RealAg Issues Panel. We got Mary Robinson, farmer from P.E.I, Kelvin Heppner, and Lyndsey Smith of RealAgriculture, and myself, Shaun Haney. Lyndsey, when you need agronomic advice, do you go to your local retailer?
Of course I do.
That's like, why not? You should. Your co-op grow team stays up to date with the latest research and technology to help support your entire operation. Talk to our team for advice tailored to your farm's needs. Co-op, here for your farm, here for your family. Learn more at coop.crs/farm. Okay, let's continue with the discussion. Mary, I want to talk to you about this sustainable ag strategy. It's something that was initiated while Minister Bobo was in that seat. Now, of course, it's Minister McCauley. You know him well, being from your home province. What are your thoughts on the progress here? There's a lot of different points of view. You got, 22 different groups involved in this process. I'm sure he's having fun putting this all together.
So I understand they're meeting every 2 weeks, which is pretty ambitious. That's a lot of work for these committee members. And I also understand it is a very diverse membership, which might give you a bit of an indication as to how easy it's going to come to some kind of decision and action pieces. Well, probably like everybody, I've been on a committee like that, and you do your best, and you hope you're actually going to come out with something that's meaningful and impactful and will deliver something. I do personally have some concerns about this committee's ability to do that. I was there when they launched it I think it was in December of 2022. Yeah. Yep. I spoke with you after that. And at that time, I think we were kind of saying, what's their end game here? So I think it's a pretty ambitious kind of mandate for a big group of people.
So if I can.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, please.
Yeah. So because I think, and this is a great opportunity to ask some of the questions we probably wanted to ask then, and knowing that you're not on this anymore, but is there clarity on what this group is supposed to do? Like, is there, we're making a strategy. Okay, so a strategy for what? Like, is there clarity on that?
Well, great point at the beginning of your comments, Lyndsey. I'm not involved in it, so I don't know. I haven't been involved in the evolution of it, so I don't think I can really say if the committee has clarity of their mandate or their vision at this point in time. I wouldn't want to, and I have so much respect for the people that are putting so much of themselves into trying to make this a go, and that's I find a frustrating exercise when you're doing your best and what's going to come of it.
Yeah, because I think, and thanks for that, because I recognize it's tough to know what happens sort of behind closed doors when you're not there. But I think for many of us, seeing this grouping of over 20 organizations trying to put, whatever this SAS is going to be, meeting so frequently, and I'd love to know, I think from the outside perspective, where do we see this going? What do we hope this is going to do? Because I'm not sure, what the intention is. So I'm hopeful that we'll see some of that maybe out of this, out of these meetings.
So here's what I think is going to come is here's our 5 strategic pillars. And then they're going to, I am doubtful that we ever get to something that's actually tangible, right? And that's the part where it's like, hey, what was this process? Well, like, you could probably write it today. Like, the 4 of us could get together and probably spend the weekend and a couple cases of beer, some really, I know you love PBR, Lyndsey. We'll buy a couple cases of PBR and we could write it. Like, you can almost predict what this is going to look like. Kelvin, am I being too cynical?
No, I think that is probably the most likely scenario coming out of this. As from what I understand, last week the committee, the advisory committee, which, as has been alluded to, has over 20 members, met with the Minister McCauley, last week, and it sounds like almost everybody on the committee, like, they've shared their points and what they want, and not everybody's aligned in what they want. And so that's where now it sounds like it's kind of up to Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada and the department what the next steps are, where they're going to choose to offend some of these groups and not please everybody, and that they're maybe coming to grips with that they we'll have to upset some of the parties at the table here. And so originally, when it was announced back in December, as Mary alluded to, the timeline was to have a draft version of the final strategy published before the end of this year. And it sounds like that's already been delayed. They're talking about the spring of 2024 at this time. So yeah, I think a lot of, like you say, Shaun, it's going to be difficult to come to an agreement here, and the government is going to have to be decisive, and that will offend some people. And if they want to actually have concrete targets and deadlines involved here, and if they don't want to upset too many people, then they're going to end up with something that, like you said, isn't super meaningful.
Well, and then we're going to say that, we need to meet some of our commitments, globally that we have promised at some of these international groups, and we have to be responsible. Yet when it comes to the G20 saying we shouldn't have fertilizer tariffs, we sort of ignore that. That's where we're not exactly having to fall in line with some of the agreements that are made out there in the international space.
In some ways, I assume that this committee would kind of work back. So Canada's made these international commitments and targets for emissions reductions and methane reductions and things like that. I assume they would just work back. But when you actually look at the detail of this, Canada hasn't set. So there's the net zero by 2050. For example, there's the language around net zero by 2050. Is agriculture going to be expected to be net zero by 2050, or is Canada expected to be net zero by 2050? And agriculture, given the importance of food production and food security and all those types of things, will agriculture have some allowances there? And they're having big discussions about things like that at this point, and how I don't see a consensus being reached at this point on big topics like that. When you look at some of the groups at the table here, from you've got Farmers for Climate Solutions, Canadian Organic Growers, Nature United, and then you have all the conventional farm groups as well: Fertilizer Canada, Canadian Canola Growers, Cattle Association, Canola Council. It's such a diverse cross section here, which I know the government wants to consult everybody, but it's going to be difficult to reach some concrete action items coming out of this.
Well, I'm glad, but at the same time, though, I'm glad they didn't railroad it and select the three groups they wanted to hear from and just wrote it. They have involved everybody, which I think gives them the opportunity to get their ear full of all of the different considerations here, and not just one side of the coin. This is complex. This is not an easy job. You're not going to make everybody happy, and that's the unfortunate part. This isn't one of those hey, we got hey, rubber stamp and everybody agrees. Nope. No, a lot of the players, they do not agree. Okay, Mary, there's been a bit of a shift in terms of Canadians' view on immigration policy. This is very close to the housing crisis, and seen some polling, not very positive. We're talking about reducing the amount of international students to Canadian universities. This could impact potentially the access to foreign workers. I know, going back to your role at CFA, this was a file you worked on a lot. What are your thoughts on the potential that we could see a bit of a throttling here of some of the access to foreign workers?
Oh, I think it is a concern for sure. I was in a meeting this week in Ottawa, and one of the high-ranking Ag Canada people said that she'd heard of a farmer who had a foreign worker on his farm, had to provide him accommodations. This guy ended up moving off farm to live with his Canadian girlfriend, and he still had to keep that bunk, that residence, open for the guy who wasn't even using it. And so I think the concern for a lot of people with government and the foreign worker program is that they jump in and they react to a little tidbit and they make adjustments to it that might not be, full thought enough, and they have unintended consequences. So I think when people hear things like that example she gave us, and they say, okay, we better have a look at what's going on here in foreign workers. Most of the workers that I know farmers accommodate do it on farm, and they do it in mobile homes, in bunkies, in whatever. And then you look at some of the mushroom guys and the workers they use, they actually own houses. They have, they rent apartments. It's much more of an urban situation. So I think it definitely has, there's some exposure there for the accommodations that some farms use to put these people up, and totally a concern because we continue to have, unemployment, but people don't want to work on farms.
Yep, that's pretty well established. I would agree with you. Lyndsey, what are your thoughts on sort of the reversal and the opinion on your immigration here?
So, I mean, there's several different parts of this, and there is as Mary outlines here, there's the very practical components of the fact that, we are producing food. We're producing either, and not, corn and beans. We're talking about fruit and veg. We're talking, our mushrooms. We're talking even dairy, honey. The honey industry uses a lot of foreign labor. And it is part of when you bring people to work on your farm, you have to put them up somewhere. I know of some people who, yes, exactly that. They own homes, several homes, that they provide for their workers. And that's a key thing that is incredibly costly. It's a lot to have to maintain. But then we've got the other side of this too, of just the overarching feelings about immigration. And I know some very pro-immigration people who are saying, wait a minute, we don't have enough houses for the people we have, let alone the people that are coming in. And I think there's that danger of seeming to be like anti-immigration when really you're pro-housing, right? In that we should not have people coming to this country that don't have somewhere to stay. And we have, in our major cities at least, a huge, huge deficit in the amount of places to put people up. We have people coming to our country through totally valid means that end up staying in hotels for years, potentially. So we really have to think about this from, as Mary says, from the very practical component of, the need for a labor force and the need for housing that labor force, but also recognizing that, we have to take care of the people that are here or be ready for the people coming in. And that might mean, and it could be a political hot potato for sure, but that might mean changing some of our targets so that we can better take care of the people that do end up coming here.
Yeah, and as somebody who stays in a lot of hotels, and you can tell from my background, I'm actually in one right now, that it would get old after a while.
It does. And I'm not making this up. There are people who stay more than a year in a hotel. It's not nice. It's not good.
Okay, let's take a break. We got more coming up here on the RealAg Issues Panel. Mary Robinson, Kelvin Heppner, Lyndsey Smith, myself, Shaun Haney. We'll be back right after this.
At Brett Young, we focus on what's real. It's how we became Canada's largest independent seed company. That's why we're asking a real farmer, what do you think of BY6217TF, Brett Young's TrueFlex Canola Hybrid?
What's that?
BY6217TF, Brett Young's TrueFlex Canola Hybrid with Pod Defender shatter reduction technology and Defender-rated clubroot and blackleg resistance.
Good yield, yeah. Probably choose it again.
Thanks, Chris. Talk to your Brett Young retailer today to see for yourself. Brett Young, distinct by design.
What's next for your fields? At Pioneer, delivering industry-leading genetics drives everything we do. From the scientists in the lab to our local teams with boots on the ground. We are determined to get there first. Developing top-performing products, proven in more growing conditions than ever before. Pioneer. What's next happens here. Visit pioneer.com/Canada to learn more.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio and the RealAg Issues Panel. Nothing beats genuine. It's like a great characteristic. Your equipment is no different. New Holland Genuine Lubricants are the only lubricants engineered, tested, and proven for New Holland equipment. When your performance is at stake, always keep it genuine. Visit your New Holland dealer to learn more. Okay, great panel here today. Mary Robinson, Kelvin Heppner, Lyndsey Smith. Kelvin, we talked earlier about the Manitoba election, and we alluded we would get to it, so let's bring it in now. Seems to be a complete total lack of ag issues and coming right down to the fact, how do I win Winnipeg? Is that correct?
That's exactly it. Then that's how Manitoba elections are normally. There are a couple of issues that are relevant to farmers, such as what the parties plan to do with the education school tax on farmland and other property. There have been some commitments made there by the PCs, and NDP are saying they would maintain the rebate as it is now, but that would probably be the extent of what there is for super agriculture related stuff. It's been, I would say, an uninspiring election campaign in many ways. NDP have been leading in the polls for the last long time, except in summer. It looked like the PCs, the incumbents, had a bit of a momentum, and there was actually a poll in middle of summer that showed them neck and neck. But right now it's looking like the New Democrats are leading the last poll. And of course, there aren't that many polls in a provincial election like this, so you have to be careful about how much you read into it. But the latest poll showed the NDP leading by 11 percentage points.
Oh, wow.
Provincially. So if you go to 338 Canada, they're putting about a 3/4 odds, 74% chance of the NDP winning the election today.
I couldn't imagine Premier Canoe would be very friendly to business, or am I stereotyping the NDP?
Well, he is certainly playing up his Gary Dewar-like credentials, and Gary Dewar, it was a longtime NDP premier here in Manitoba, later became Canada's ambassador to the U.S., who certainly had more of street cred when it came to the business side of things. And Wab Kinew, along with becoming the first Indigenous premier, he does actually have his education, post-secondary education is in economics. And so a lot of the campaign promises the NDP have been making have been somewhat, I think, similar to what the PCs would make. They've announced a gas tax reduction, for example. So that certainly would be counter to what the federal Liberals would want to see. There's also been promises of major spending, and that's where a lot of the criticism, I think, of the NDP comes into play here. How are they ever going to pay for all the things that they promised? If you live in a swing riding, it's almost guaranteed that you're getting a new emergency room, according to what Wab Kinew has been announcing. So, but then the Conservatives, on the other hand, have run, again, a more fiscally responsible, tough on crime campaign, but also, like I said before, uninspiring and at times even unlikable. One of their main campaign talking points has been that they are refusing and that they're going to stand firm on refusing to search a landfill for potentially murdered women that some community, that the Indigenous communities believe are located in this landfill. And I don't understand the strategy. Like, it makes no sense to me why you make that one of your main campaign talking points. It's on the front page ads of the newspapers this week.
Mary, what's the political climate like right now in the Maritimes? And you can speak to P.E.I. specifically if you want. And I sort of rope into that question too, like the economic climate. Like, how are people feeling right now about how things are going?
You mean federally?
No, just in the province. Yeah, just in the province.
Yeah, so we have a Conservative government here, and they have a majority, and they seem to be pretty well liked. They seem to be kind of hitting it out of the park. And one thing I did want to mention was P.E.I. has a fantastic school food program, and it's a pay what you can kind of situation. And I would love to see, there's 4 provinces in Canada that have that. And did you know that 1 in 4 children in our country go to school hungry? And when you think about that, play it out there, a healthcare system, corrections, social, all that, what an amazing investment for every province, or at least the country, to make. But in PEI, I think the King government is pretty popular. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens here in the federal election. We have 4 MPs. Some people say that might be a little rich for a population of less than 200,000. But those 4 MPs have been Liberal for a little while now. All 4 are, and Lawrence Macaulay being one of them. And the other 3 will be interesting to see if they're all able to hold on to their seats.
Yeah, Lawrence Macaulay is Canada's version of Chuck Grassley. He's rerunning again. And, he's definitely the most senior person in the House of Commons and going to take another go at it, it sounds like.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't have a yay or a nay directly on that. So if you're saying you've heard
think about the cabinet shuffle. So, the word was that they had to commit that they were going to rerun. Now, maybe that was for just cabinet posts that the Prime Minister deems important. Maybe agriculture sort of kind of fell under the shuffle there, maybe. But that's why I'm making that assumption.
Yeah, we are kind of the only duckling around the cabinet table, which makes no sense when people think back to 2017 and Dominic Barton really tried to sing the song about agriculture. So, yeah, it doesn't make sense.
Your 1 in 4 number, I'm actually surprised it's not more. My sister is a school counselor, and she deals with a lot of families where there's a lot of issues, and she has just the saddest of stories in trying to help kids. And it's a situation that is not covered enough.
Well, and Kelvin, I was going to ask, so in this emergency rooms, is there any discussion on school food programs as well?
I don't know if on the food side of things, there are a fair number of school food programs already in our province, where especially breakfast kind of thing, kids will go for breakfast. But there's been, both parties, I believe, have promised increased funding for education. Again, it's election season, and so there's a lot of big promises. If you look at the actual details, the NDP have released a more detailed financial plan, and a lot of those promises are in the 3rd and 4th year of the term, and so you wonder whether they will actually happen then. You're right, though. Cost of living and affordability and food bank usage is something that we're dealing. Like Manitoba has a high percentage Indigenous population, and those are major issues that whoever our next government will be will have to deal with that.
Yep. Lyndsey, on the economic front, farm profitability, if you look at the farm situation, you heard my discussion with Tyler Shao from agmarket.net earlier this week. Not a very rosy picture for the markets. In the farmer rapid fire, continuing to hear people's concern about the commodity market sliding, inputs staying where they are. We got WTI crude around $91. There was one of the farmers talked about $2 diesel this week. Farm profitability, I think, is really, and a shrinking of it, so to speak, seems to be the real concern out there.
So, and not surprisingly so, right? I mean, for the most part, when we think about overall affordability, there's so many factors right now that are large scale that they're obviously impacting individuals, and farmers are no different. But then, of course, we've got the industry dynamic, and we've got, the cost of production really increasing, and then exactly that, when the prices have sort of corrected back down, if we can call it that, that just bites into margin realistically. So I will definitely say, I mean, just in some of the farmer friends that I talk to, definitely a lot more caution on, maybe considering land purchases, those sorts of things. It really does feel like at least a couple of the farmers I even just talked to this week sort of talking about, let's just hold tight. And really starting to sort of pull back any sort of expansion idea, anything like that, trying to sort of to buckle down and really sharpen that pencil a little bit. So I think, overall, there's some really rough times ahead economically, and for farmers, I think that there's definitely that expectation that it's time to do some risk management for sure.
The housing market and the land market are not the same, but one thing that I think is similar here in 23, volume of trades is down. But prices have not really dropped. Like when land is trading, like there was a record in, I think, Missouri this week that Farm Journal reported like $36,000 an acre, I believe it was. When land's moving, it's still moving at pretty good value, Kelvin.
It is, but like you said, you only need, you're down to maybe only having 2 or 3 interested buyers at these interest rates rather than having 20 or 30. And so how much higher do rates have to go before you're down to only one buyer, and then that's when we see prices soften or maybe even turn down. And Lyndsey, you mentioned decreasing prices. We saw futures markets down again today sharply with the USDA reports. So yeah, crop prices are trending lower, and everything else, I'm not sure we're ever going to go back to where prices were. I saw somebody tweet, I don't want to party like it's 1999. I want to grocery shop like it's 1999. I saw that.
That's right.
Yeah, if
I'm not sure we're never going back to 1999 grocery.
No, we're never. No.
If you missed that interview with Tyler from agmarket.net, encourage you to go back to Wednesday's podcast to listen to it. The full interview is also, or actually I split into 2. They're on YouTube as well and at RealAgriculture.com. Hey, Mary, thanks for joining us this week. It's been awesome. You are definitely coming back. I don't care what you tell me.
Well, look forward to it. Thanks for trying to make me look like I know what I'm talking about. You guys are awesome. Love your show. You're bang on. Great to listen to. Thank you.
Well, and have a great potato harvest as well to you, everybody out there on the island. Kelvin, have a great weekend. I know you're done combining now, I believe. So, what are you doing with all your time?
All that time. Well, I'm going to hopefully cheer for or celebrate a Blue Jays playoff berth this weekend.
Please. Lyndsey, have yourself a great weekend. It was great to see you. And I know you got a busy full weekend on the sheep farm.
Yeah, absolutely. But also, we almost made it a whole show without sports talk, but we didn't. Cheers.
Oh, it's also a great weekend of college football. It's the Ryder Cup this weekend.
But
you gotta be up all night to watch the Ryder Cup. Ryder Cup is on my bucket list of something I would love to do sometime. I've just heard it's so much fun. Okay, if you have any feedback on today's show, send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also call the RealAg feedback line. It is 855-776-6147. On behalf of everybody here at Real Agriculture, thanks so much for getting real and getting connected with RealAg Radio, and we'll chat again next week. Cheers, everybody.